Alright, what's going on, guys? Out in the garage messing with the Navi here. Today I was working on removing the linkage from the foot brake to the front and rear drum, making it so it only operates the rear drum. It's a pretty difficult process. You got to take a lot off. As you can see here, it's quite a few bolts. And don't recommend this to anybody, but just wanted to share how I made it work. And if you do decide to do this at your own risk. But as you can see, I do have it fully operational. And just wanted to share how I did it and explain how the junction box works. The reason I did this is because one, a normal bike, when you go to upgrade, if you are just looking to get into riding, like my girlfriend, I'd like for her to learn how a normal brake operates, and actually, in my opinion, a little bit safer than having it operate both. As if you hit gravel, like here in Ohio, there's a lot of gravel and salt on the roads, especially right now. So when you apply if you slammed the foot brake, it could potentially lock up the front wheel in like a gravel situation and cause the bike to spill. So I wanted it to operate solely the rear. So this is the junction box, and this is how the foot brake applies brake pressure to the front and rear drum. So in the bike, this is how it'll look with the bolt in there, obviously. Removing the cover, there will be additional cable here. This connects to the rear drum, and this is the front cable going all the way up to the front brake, and this is the cable that connects to the foot brake. So you can see here I'm applying tension as the rear cable would, and when I apply the foot brake, being this cable, it applies tension to both the front and rear cable, making it actuate both the front and rear brake. And you'll need to disassemble the junction box. To remove all these cables. The other one for the front, connected right here, traveled upwards, up the forks, and then came through the frame right here, and there was a bolt holding it, and came up into the junction box. That was sitting right here under the tank. After I got the junction box removed, I had to try and find which cable would work best, being either the front cable or the original rear cable that ran to the drum. The cable that originally is on here is really short for the foot brake, so that one was out of the question. So ended up going with the rear brake, and even though it's longer, I was able to route it, so it wasn't a big deal. And besides the cable being extra long, there was another issue I ran into with when I decided to either utilize the front or the rear, and I'll show you that now. We'll run over to the workbench here. And as you can see, sitting side by side, this one is the one that was connected originally to the foot brake, and this would be the front cable running to the front drum. And the foot brake is a little bit smaller, so both the front cable running to the drum and the rear cable running to the rear drum, were slightly larger than the cable running to the foot brake. So I had to find a way to make it so that the cable would slide into the original point where the foot brake cable had gone. So what I came up with is sanding this metal part right here down enough that it would slide into the original socket for the OEM cable for the foot brake. What I did is I removed the cable that connects to the rear drum and was going to utilize that for this process. So what I did was once I removed it completely, I put it in the vise. You can see I removed this rubber seal here. And what I did is I just put electrical tape over top of the wire here, or the cable, and this little nipple here to protect it while I'm sanding. And then I got some sandpaper and just ripped off a piece, just long enough for this. And I hand sanded it down to the right diameter to fit into the OEM little holder. And I would periodically check it with calipers to ensure that I had that it would fit. So after I checked it with the calipers, I came over back to the bike and verified that it fit in the holder here. As you can see, it's just part of the frame. And went ahead and made sure that it connected and fit in the holder there. And once I did that, I took it out of the holder and first connected it in the back. So I put it in the original slot, just how the rear brake is. It's the one closest to the tire, and this outer one, I think a lot of people are mistaking as the linkage to the front brake, but is actually not. It is the parking brake. So I think a lot of people are getting that mixed up. So I got it set up just like OEM, routed it normal, just how it is from the factory up until this point right here. So after the CVT cover, it comes under the hose, on the inside of the hose, and wraps near this wire here. And as you can see, I cable tied it to keep it away from the engine, even though it was actually stayed far away from the engine, but just wanted to be sure. And then I route it all the way up and over. So I looped it over everything, came around the other side, which is the right side of the bike where the junction box is and the foot brake. And I ran it down. And then from this point on, I ran it just how the factory mini cable that connected to the junction box, routed it exactly how that one was. And as you can see here, there's this clamp. There's this clamp here, and this is kind of how the OEM one is set up. So you'll have to remove this plug from this to gain access to this bolt and remove the original cable. And so what I did was I removed the shorty cable that was connected to this from the factory that connected to the junction box, and I cut the rubber gasket off of it and reused the clamp to make it so it's a little bit more rigid setup. I did have to cut a little bit of this protective sleeve right here. I had to cut about an inch off of that to fit the rubber gasket in order to utilize this clamp. But I was pretty happy with how it came out, and I think it's really clean and makes it so the operation of the cable isn't moving very much. Well, that's how I disconnected the linkage to the front drum for the foot brake, and look forward to getting it back together and testing it out. But before we go, I did dive into the manual a little bit and just wanted to share some interesting facts about the Honda Navi, and found some interesting stuff out. So the weight limit on the Honda Navi is 344 pounds. That that shocked me. I can't believe how heavy or how much this thing can hold. To put it in perspective, my CRF 450L Supermoto its max weight limit is 220 pounds. And this little bike right here, the weight limit's 344 pounds. And then for the oil changes, this thing doesn't have a oil filter. It has an oil screen, so it's you get something you can reuse and clean off when you're doing the oil changes. The initial oil change is 600 miles, or after 1 month, which I thought was kind of weird in terms of the length of time. And then after the initial, it's every 2,500 miles or 6 months. Won't be doing it every 6 months, but probably will do it more often than every 2,500 miles. And then the final thing I thought was interesting is the battery. The battery is actually under this cover here, and it's just a Phillips screwdriver to get to it. But I just thought it was weird that they threw a cover over top of it. And that's about it for the facts, but I just still can't get over how this has a weight limit of 220 and this has a weight limit of 344. I had to do a double take on it because I couldn't believe that it was that freaking high. But pretty neat. Actually, I rode Jess on it for a minute, and yeah, I couldn't really tell a difference in power or anything with her on it. I mean, we just rode through the neighborhood though. But I'm gonna get this bike back put together and test her out. But until then, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.